Tandem's Octerrorfest. All month long, we'll be celebrating the horrifying delights of the spookiest month, October. Prepare yourself for episodes that frighten and delighten your spine as we chill you to the bone. You can find us on YouTube and Instagram at Terror in Tandem, and you'll always find our latest episode on our website, terrorintandem.com.
Welcome
to Octerrorfest Spectacularium.
Exactly, it's Speculum and the chilly season.
Oh, there's a little bit of a nip to the air, and I'm not just talking about alcoholism.
There sure is. Boy, oh boy, it is getting cold.
It's getting chilly out there, yeah. Octerrites.
Also in here, in our surprisingly uninsulated luxury property.
No, we're just we're on the road this week as we celebrate the anniversary of your hosts.
Yeah,
that
meeting
have
and
been loving,
joining in the eyes of the God that we all worship.
Yeah, exactly. Cthulhu, thank you very much.
Yes, for blessing this unholy union.
We send you our
sanity.
Unborn.
Well, before we get started talking about the episode, I kind of want to talk about what we saw in the theater the other night.
What was that?
The Substance. I can't stop thinking about it.
It was amazing.
It was really, like, it's been talked about to death. It's been very hyped up, but don't let that scare you. It's like legit. It's amazing. It's definitely my favorite thing I've seen all year.
Well, sadly, we could have really missed the opportunity to see it in the theater, and I would have been just as happy to see it, but I am so glad we got to see it in a theater, because it really is meant to be, I think, experienced with other people in a theater for the first viewing.
It's fun to watch people walk out at certain points and be like, haha. But I especially recommend theater viewing because of the sound design in this movie.
Yeah.
The sound design is really, really integral to the experience, and it is best experienced when it's, all around you in a theatrical setting. It was so, every second of the movie was perfect. I was like deeply in love with it a minute into it. It was crazy.
Same. It's indescribable. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. I'm sure we're going to talk about it.
We will.
For our episode on aging. Best of the year.
We're absolutely going to find a way to talk more about this movie, but I just wanted to hop on and say, a lot of times when movies are really, really hyped up and talked about a lot, I'm a little skeptical, because my interests tend not to be very accessible. I'm not saying that as like a flex. I'm just saying that's just how it is for me. A lot of the things I like are niche. So this, though, I'm not saying you can bring your kids or your grandma to it. Don't.
Although there was parents and their like grown child there.
Oh yeah, no, the movie's
like
for
young adult child.
The movie's for anybody who wants to see it. I'm saying, like, don't bring your little kids to it.
Oh
it's
no,
gnarly.
it's rated R, isn't
it?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter. There were like all these things of screenings of Terrifier 3 with like people having to walk out with their little children. It's like, the hell did you bring them there for?
Yeah, that's
what is wrong with you?
Really strange.
Yeah.
Well, I would recommend seeing it in the theater. It's probably only running in like smaller second run theaters.
So good.
But you must.
And Demi Moore, whatever awards she does win or doesn't win, because awards are dumb, but she deserves all of them.
Demi?
I don't know.
Demi Moore.
I mean, it's Demi. I've heard it both ways. So,
well, she was anything but Demi.
Perfect.
Or Demi.
She was perfect. It was so good. And Margaret Qualley was amazing. Dennis Quaid, he was great playing what I imagine is a mix-up between Dennis and Randy Quaid.
He actually took over the role that was Ray Liotta's.
Yeah.
But he passed away, sadly, before they started filming.
And that would have been real neat.
Yeah.
Because Ray Liotta was a hell of an actor.
So, It was great. Go see it. Well, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
This has been Terror in Tandem, folks. Goodbye.
Oh, wouldn't you all be so happy?
Wouldn't you?
Jerks.
Hate
Just
listeners.
Kidding. We love you. No, today we're going to be talking about those little things in horror movies that maybe you've seen a lot of, maybe you've seen too much of. You know, cliches are cliche for a reason. Sometimes they're fun and sometimes they're overdone.
We are going for the low-hanging fruit in this episode, and just grab it on cliches. That's
I don't think it's low hanging.
my fruit hangs pretty low.
I think we're talking about cliches and whether you love them or hate them. And it'll draw you to other examples of maybe when it hasn't been so successful on your own, and maybe where the origin of some of these cliches have come from, or when they were used early on in some of the horror films.
Well, let's start at the beginning here. Webster's Dictionary defines a cliche as anything that starts with the sentence Webster's Dictionary defines.
That's a good one.
Perfect. Well, I think that about sums it up. Goodbye, everybody.
Can you please stop trying to end this episode?
I have things
our
to
listener?
do. My second secret family is expecting me.
Shall I?
Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
I mean, on our anniversary, I was going to keep you like surface level, ground level, the whole time.
It is freezing in the cellar. Please, I will be.
But for our special anniversary gift, I was going to keep you above ground.
The secret is you gotta curl up next to the boiler, and then you have enough heat.
Well, our boiler's down.
It is.
That's why it's so cold in here.
Yeah.
Anyway, whose boiler isn't down is Freddy Krueger's.
Yeah.
And so begins my first cliche, which is the false ending.
Oh.
So just when you think it's over,
it's not over.
A twist ending.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, does that have a false ending that then leads into a sequel that doesn't in no way address that ending?
Directed by Wes Craven. This film seemingly at the end resolves with the characters defeating Freddy, but the ending suggests that he still is in charge. There's a couple of different aspects to these sort of false hope, false endings. After Nancy sets a trap and confronts Freddy, we believe she's defeated him, but he comes back. At one point, Nancy and her friends escape the dream world for good, but Freddy continues to go into their dreams. He doesn't play by the rules, so their escape is always temporary. And then in the final scene of Nightmare on Elm Street, Nancy wakes up to find that Freddy's nightmare spell on her is broken.
And
she wakes up to
Boozy
a new
Mom is
day.
alive.
Well, Boozy Mom no longer, because she says, I renounce my alcohol dependency.
Right. You know, there was two things her mom used to love: drinking during the day and drugging her daughter.
And she's newly alive because her mother didn't make it.
Ended up a stain on a mattress.
So as we see this sort of foggy morning.
No, it's shot like a dream.
Yeah. Well, in fog. It's shrouded in fog.
Dream fog.
Nancy's alive mother says, I'm not going to drink anymore. And then Nancy reunites with all of her friends. She gets into Glenn's convertible.
Glenn, he's back. Glenn.
And then seconds later, Freddy reappears, takes Nancy's mother and takes over control of the convertible.
Well, the convertible becomes
in
the Freddy mobile.
Yeah. And speeds away. And that's what we're left with. We're left with Nancy still in a dream state where Freddy is in control.
Yeah, she never got out of the dream.
No.
Essentially.
She never did.
Which is kind of awesome.
Yeah. Is it?
But
when you can't get out of a dream?
No, I mean, as an ending, it's kind of awesome. It's really one of those things that was ruined by the fact that it had 19 sequels.
Yeah.
If they had just kept it at that, what a downer. What a bummer. She didn't win.
But I do like New Nightmares.
No, listen, some of those sequels are amazing. 3 is great. But the second one especially deviates so completely from the first movie, and none of the original people are in it except for Robert Englund.
I ever saw the second.
It's an interesting movie on its own merits, and it's had a very interesting reassessment through queer theory. Because even at the time, Robert Englund said, oh, yeah, this is a gay movie. And there was a lot of controversy over that. And the actor is, at the time, he was closeted, but he has since come out and really talked about it.
He was just interviewed about doing like a reboot. Would he ever reboot? And he was like, I'm too old, but I would love to come back and be like a nurse or a doctor.
Oh, Robert Englund should have like a cameo. Yeah, but he's like fucking 80 years old. Like, no, come on. That's a very good answer, Robert. Unlike Ian McKellen, who's like, I will still be Gandalf when I'm 100.
My next example of false endings is from the Final Destination original OG 2000, directed by James Wan.
Is that starring our old buddy Devon Sawa?
I think
It
so.
is. It is. The answer is yes. I mean, a Devon Sawa movie that I don't know about doesn't exist.
So the film itself is very clear from the beginning. You can't outrun death. And yet the protagonist of the film,
Devon Sawa,
Alex, spends the whole time trying to do just that. So at the beginning, he has a premonition of a plane crash and then wakes up, and it's a dream. Wakes up and it seems like he's prevented the disaster. He gets off the plane, tells people to get off, but it doesn't. The plane explodes with most of his class and teachers still on the plane.
And it's interesting that this movie came out in 2000, because I feel like if you did that after 2001, the movie would essentially be the rest of it just him being like
detained.
By Homeland Security and waterboarded.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good for him. I mean, it was strange timing to have this film come out then. But some of these you will see my examples can fit in a couple of different of my cliches, but this one in particular. Anyway, after some of the characters survive the plane crash, they're relieved. They think they've escaped death, but then it follows each one of them as death starts to come for them one by one. And then at the end, Alex and his friends are safe. They take that trip to Paris, and then you see what happens at the end. I mean, it's not a spoiler alert to say that this death scene in Paris is probably one of the cooler deaths of the whole film.
And again, when it was just Final Destination and not Final Destination 23, the return of Final Destination, that was cool.
Yeah, Moulin Rouge no more.
More like Moulin Claret.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good.
Thank you.
The blood runs rouge.
Sanguine.
The river Seine
Songe.
runs rouge.
It does. It does. Runs red with wine.
And then my last example is from the movie The Descent.
That's weird, because I thought your last example was your last example. Oh my gosh. Another false ending.
Another false ending. This is a 2005 film directed by Neil Marshall.
And let's be careful here, because I don't want to hear anything bad about this movie.
After the characters initially escape the cave, it seems like they've survived. However, they have to return to the cave because what they've just experienced isn't over. And near the end, the main character, Sarah, has a moment where she appears to be safe and finds a way out. But she gets into the car and looks over to the side and sees her friend Juno in the passenger seat, and she screams and screams and screams and screams. We know that Sarah survives, but she does see the ghost of her friend. So although she's the only survivor of these spelunkers, she does make it out of the cave into the car. But does she?
She go crazy.
Is she okay?
No.
Is it for real? That's the U.S. version. I don't know if you know this, but in the UK cut, there's actually a different final scene that's bleaker and wasn't released to the US because it was considered too depressing.
Yeah, they do that a lot for delicate US audiences.
Yeah, I mean, which is weird. So
well, Americans demand a happy ending, and that's why so much of our reality is distorted and fucked up, because we don't accept the fact that life doesn't provide that.
The same thing happens with her, seemingly surviving this humanoid monster creature.
Yeah, like the weird albino cave mole people.
And she wakes up in the cave, and then she is like living her life. She wakes up celebrating her daughter's birthday. And then when the camera pans out, we see that the creature is like slowly creeping up to her. So she never escaped. It's all a hallucination. She's still in the cave.
What do you think it wants?
It's just her life force.
So, all of this, the earliest example that I could think of this phenomenon is actually one of my all-time favorite short stories, and that's Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce, which has one of the all-time great twist endings. Look, it was written in the 19th century, so I'm just going to say it. It's a tale of a Civil War. I think he's a Confederate soldier, and he's about to be hung when he escapes and makes it back to his home, back to his wife. Like it's his only drive is to make it back. And right at the end, he's on the gallows and his neck snaps.
Yeah, it's like in that moment.
In the like the whole life flashing before your eyes thing, his was just in the span of like a second of him dying. He had this fantasy of the rope snapping and him escaping. And it's such a downer, and it really pulled the rug out. But, that was I think probably one of the first literary examples of that. And it's been stolen ever since.
Yeah.
To varying degree. I would say sometimes it's really awesome. Like Carrie doesn't have a false ending, but it has a false ending.
And Friday the 13th.
Well, we'll get into all that. Yeah, Friday the first one.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Pretty good, yeah. And every Shyamalan movie.
And every Scream, pretty much.
That actually plays into one of my tropes.
Yeah, I figured. Honestly, you can't have a cliche episode without mentioning Scream.
Yeah, I mean, it's full of it by design. So my first one that I'm going to get into, it actually kind of plays into what you just talked about. I'm going to talk about the unkillable villain. Now, I want to be
least favorite.
Well, I want to be specific here. I don't mean something that is so powerful and great that it can't be killed, like a Lovecraftian monster or a concept.
Like a Freddy Krueger.
I'm talking more about monsters that break the rules set by the movie and are just kind of cheaply unkillable. And exactly, unfortunately, Freddy Krueger is one of the biggest offenders of this. So this isn't so much like the, Godzilla type monster. It's the one where the protagonists are given a series of rules or steps or rituals or things that they have to do to banish or kill this villain. And they do it. And then right at the end of the movie, even though they did everything right, the villain's just like, bah, I'm still here. Mm-hmm. And that is because it's the 80s or the 90s and the movie makes too much money to not have sequels. And the producers are like, okay, right at the end, you've got to leave the door open.
And Freddy Krueger doesn't play by the rules. So, of course, you can never kill him.
But, what happens here is the more you rely on this and the more sequels you make based on this conceit, you have to come up with more and more convoluted, reasons, justifications for it. And they'll call it lore, but it's just bullshit. So, I think one of the craziest examples is by the time Halloween 5 rolls around, Michael Myers has been stabbed and burned and shot and whatever, and there's no explanation as to why he does not stop. And then Halloween 5 introduces the character of the mysterious man in black who breaks him out of jail at the end and then never shows up again, and that's never explained.
Yeah.
Because in the 6th movie, they introduced the Celtic cult of the Thorn, and Michael is actually a supernatural being. And then they never explain that either, and they never revisit it again, because by the 7th movie, it's just back to the same old stuff, and Jamie Lee Curtis is back. But then they rebooted it. You know what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this? So, every time they just show, Freddy's hand at the end of the movie, then the writers are like, okay, well, we got to do this quick little thing of why we're back here. And you don't. We all know why you're back. You're back for money. It's like when your favorite band reunites after 20 years and 4 of them have been divorced multiple times. You get this, right? Yeah. You understand it's not a love of music. And
their voices don't hit the same pitch.
No, and they hate each other.
Think of it in relation to a film villain it's not going to hit the same. They can't hit those high notes anymore. They can't hit those beats anymore.
Now, the problem is
It's all nostalgia at that point.
Exactly, it is, and I hate nostalgia. I really do. I think it is.
I love it.
I hate it. I think it's one of the worst.
I'm nostalgic over nostalgia.
I think it's just a way for the studios to, avoid creativity and risk taking and just saying like, hey, piggies, remember being a kid? That was fun. Well, here's a bunch of shit from your youth.
Well, oink, oink, because I'm into it.
Everybody kind of likes it because that's the point. But just relying on that as the, quote unquote creative force behind your movie, it's empty.
Well, when they do it, they just do it to be lazy.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, you've always liked Freddy. He's back.
That's the thing is, now I can't come up with an example where this is done well because the motivation behind doing something like this is cynical and greed-based. It's not creative-based. So you're not entering into a sequel to explore aspects of the story you didn't get to or, go deeper into the character or something. You that's secondary. The primary is let's get these idiots back for more money, and then in the middle of the script writing, you're like, he's back because when you buried him upside down in the consecrated ground and read from the book, you put a consonant where a vowel should have been.
But that's what the whole Scream reboot was benefited from, was the nostalgia factor and bringing back characters.
Understand that, but in Scream, it's a different villain behind the mask each time.
Yeah.
It's not the same person.
Right.
I mean, they're all dead. Freddy and Jason and Michael, they go through, especially Freddy, by the third or fourth movie, they're visiting his mom, who was a nun, and burying him in holy ground and doing all this weird shit. And at the end, he's just like, I'm back. And it never comes up. So
your first is Michael, and second is Jason, and third is Freddy.
Yeah, I mean, all of
the trifecta.
All of them, and it's a result of, the kind of studio meat grinder of the 80s of just pumping these IPs out. And then in the 90s, the Weinsteins were really guilty of that with the Hellraiser sequels, of just pumping sequels out so that they could retain the rights and not have it go back to Clive Barker. They actually made an entire movie. I think Judgment was or one of them, where they only did it in a couple of weeks because they didn't want the rights to lapse.
Yeah.
That you're never going to get a good example if that's your motivation. So the unkillable villain because we don't want to lose our IP. I don't like that cliche.
I hear you. I don't mind. It just, if it's I saw the devil and the character is unkillable and should be, that bothers me.
You are literally the only person on earth that has that complaint.
Well, I like to be unique.
Do you?
New York. Okay, so my next cliche that's rich with examples is when characters split up.
Yeah.
It happens in so many ensemble movies.
Why?
The group divides and they become vulnerable. So
listen, there's a certain point where we'll cover more ground that way. It's oh, you got somewhere to be?
Yeah.
Shit, man.
Especially when you're going into an unknown place. I would lock arms.
How about we just slowly, methodically, and carefully cover all the ground together?
Yeah. So the first and probably one of the originators of this is 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which just celebrating its 50th anniversary.
And to be fair, those characters were dipshits.
Yeah. Directed by Tobe Hooper. And, they're in a rural area. They're isolated. And so when the characters split up, obviously it makes easier targets for Leatherface. So that is a plot device, obviously. But for example, Pam goes off alone to investigate the house. She is totally alone and then totally ambushed. Sally and her friends, when they're together, they're okay. But then they separate. And they can't help each other get out of the situations that they then find themselves. She does eventually escape, but her friends are not able to help her at all.
Not even Franklin?
Yeah, no. I mean, Franklin's useless.
Franklin has a bad time the whole way through.
Yeah.
He just has a terrible day from the moment they pick up that hitchhiker to the moment he's getting chainsawed in a wheelchair.
And when they also separate and they make bad decisions, when they split up to search for their missing friends, they overlook any escape routes or ways to get out of the situation they find themselves in.
That one I'll give you. Because at the beginning, they didn't necessarily know that it would be a bad idea to split up. I mean, yes, the gas station guy was like, don't go there, but they didn't listen to him.
This weird, creepy house with weird things hanging, nobody around.
But if you don't know you're in a horror movie and nothing's gone wrong yet, I think it's forgivable. However, you're right. Later on, once people go missing, yeah.
And they don't talk to each other. They don't say, let's meet back here in 5 minutes. Or if I'm not back in 5 minutes, don't come looking. Go back and call the police or something.
Listen, if characters talked to each other in media, then Lost would have been 1 episode long.
Yeah, but they don't have any plans. They don't make any plans. They just go blindly into a potentially dangerous situation. Or maybe it would be safe, but nobody's coming out and waving them into the house.
I would argue
it's safe in here, everyone.
That it was not potentially dangerous so much as incredibly dangerous.
My next example is Friday the 13th. 1980, directed by Sean S. Cunningham. Every time there's a noise, one of the counselors goes to check it out.
And it is dark as shit at that place.
They don't come back.
No, not even Kevin Bacon.
Jack and Marcy decide to go off alone. And Pam Voorhees comes to get them. And they're never to be seen again. Other characters then still continue to split off, and they don't, again, communicate about vital information of what they're seeing. Oh, I saw this dead body. I saw this person's body. I'm going to go run and tell the group.
Yeah.
Everybody in the group stay here. I'm going to go check this out. Oh, I saw a dead body. We should stay together as a group. They often panic, too, when they're alone. So
it's
Alice,
easier to.
Yeah. Alice is alone in her cabin and she starts to get super freaked out and she can't, like, she's useless.
Yeah.
And also, they, again, can't figure out how to escape or an escape plan. Basically, it just becomes a lone counselor running for her life and going out in a boat in the middle of the water where she thinks she's safe.
Leading into a false ending. But again, that's the thing. You're describing all these things, and as I'm thinking about them, I'm like, they're definitely cliches, and you're not wrong, but I still love this movie.
Well, these are the formative ones.
Right. You know what? We're talking about examples, like they've been done to death since then.
I said cliches aren't bad. In these examples that I'm giving, our podcast is meant to be positive and uplifting.
Celebratory.
And just because a cliche is a cliche, it didn't always start out that way.
Also, there's a big difference between Friday the 13th Part 1 and like Part 8.
Yeah, I mean, if characters are still splitting up in Jason Goes to New York, I don't know what to tell you.
Jason Takes Manhattan.
Oh, sorry.
For the last 10 minutes of the movie.
And then my last example is Cabin Fever from 2002.
Oh, the classic Eli Roth joint.
You'll never hear me mention another Eli Roth
I'm surprised that you're going there.
It's characters who are dealing with a flesh-eating virus. So
actually, in terms of Eli Roth movies, I thought it was one of his better ones. This is a good movie. Yeah, it's one of his better ones.
The group decides to split up to search for help and supplies, which if you're in a cabin in the woods and someone is not doing well, it does really make sense to do that. So you absolutely have to find help. But Jeff and Amy, when they split up, they can't help each other. They're immediately put in danger and they can't help each other. So that is a bad choice. And again, lack of communication. They don't so much worry about, I forget, is that character from that's basically dying of the virus. They're not able to even care for that character anymore.
No, they leave her in a separate cabin, like, to just die.
And they're like trying to figure out and then separate and make terrible choices. And nothing is helpful. They all end up getting cabin fevered.
Doot. It's gross too.
Instead of, saying, listen, Joe and I, it's not Joe. I'll just use Amy and Jeff. Amy and I, this is Jeff speaking. Hi, I'm Jeff. Amy and I are going to go into town and find a hospital or a police station.
That sounds reasonable.
If we're not back in 2 hours, then we're never coming back.
Thank you for providing clarity in short, easy to understand instructions.
And we're going to do our best to get you help. That's what you have to do. And people have to wait. That's the other thing. Nobody wants to sit still and wait.
Yep.
They're like, you know what? I'm just going to split off for 1 second and go and jerk off to a magazine. Somebody's dying in the other room and you have to find time to get your pickle.
It is an Eli Roth
tickled.
movie. I would suggest that if these characters just pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, they'd be fine.
It's just this is a cliche for your cliche's sake.
Yeah.
That constant splitting up of these characters is a device to make sure that they don't live.
Oh yeah, listen, if you are up against a supernatural murder machine, strength in numbers, baby.
Well, why don't we take a break, and when we come back, we'll get into more cliches.
Hello, I'm Connor Cochran. Over a century ago, my father, Connell, came to the beautiful town of Santa Mira from a simple life in Ireland as a druidic blood priest. With just a dream and an ancient pact with demons, my father was determined to bring the joyous celebration of Samhain to America with a line of spooky, silly, and just downright fun masks. Now, as many of you know, back in 1982, the original line of silver shamrock masks, when coupled with our famous ad jingle, may have slightly turned your children's heads into writhing piles of bugs. And that's on us. But that was my dad's company, and he's dead now. Today, I am proud to announce the return of Silver Shamrock's high-quality line of spooky Halloween masks, now virtually guaranteed to leave your head in largely about the same condition it was before, mostly. So come on down to Silver Shamrock. Sure, maybe we turned thousands of kids' heads into bugs that one time, but that was like 40 years ago, before we knew that kind of stuff was wrong. So sing it with me. The clock is ticking. It's almost time. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver. Oh my God. It's happening again. Shut it down! Shut it down! This is a fake ad for a fake product on a horror-themed podcast. Masks are fun, but they shouldn't turn your heads into bugs. Also, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch deserves a lot more love than it gets. And we're back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Talking about cliches here, I'm going to go with the next one. Jump scares. My next one is jump scares. Now, jump scares are exactly what they sound like. You know, something on the screen flashes on into your view, jumps out. There's usually a loud sound design or effect or like a crescendo of music that accompanies it. So it's, designed to shock you in the moment. And it's literally make you jump out of your seat. That's where it gets the name. So why
scare you out of your seat?
Yeah. Well, why do people use them? Is because they are very dependable and they work. It does startle you. It does get you out of your seat. And horror is, depending on, it's very dependent on your personal experience and your likes and dislikes, your quirks. What scares one person is commonplace to another person or even funny to them. But being startled is primal. It's instinctual. It's a universal trait. It brings me to my next point is that I would argue the reason that jump scares are overused and kind of cheap is it's a misunderstanding of being scared or fear. Because a jump scare is not fear. It's startling you.
Yeah, but,
now, what happens when you're startled is largely physiologically the same thing that happens when you're afraid. Your heartbeat increases. Your adrenaline starts pumping. Time can slow down. You get into a state of readiness. But that is not fear. That is instinctual. That's like
I like jump scares because it's thrilling.
dropping something, loud behind you and responding to that is just something that any like living creature is going to do. So it's not necessarily scary on its own. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Like if you are using it, the pitfall is because it's effective and it's easy to do, if your movie kind of sucks, you can just cram a bunch of jump scares into it and, the audience reacts.
What I don't like is when they add like music accompaniment and then the jump scare. It's like, I don't need a lead up, just do it.
Well, sometimes it is very dependent on being in a movie theater. The reason you are jumping is because it's very loud and, it's all around you. If you're watching this at home, you are not having the same effect having a softer sound coming from one direction in front of you. So it's a little bit of a crutch for, somebody whose script isn't scary or the story doesn't stand on its own. Now, that being said, I'm not against jump scares. Effectively done, they can put the audience into a state of mind and into a physical state where you're more susceptible to fear. It's like CGI. It complements an already strong foundation, but if it's your primary, it's weak. It's paper thin. So I want to give an egregious example of a jump scare done poorly, and then I'm going to give one where it's done beautifully. So jump scares, in my opinion, the ones that are done really well are the ones that lull the audience into a state where they're either relaxed so that the jump scare really hits them out of nowhere, or they can kind of sense something's coming, but they don't know quite what and they don't know quite when. So you're in a very heightened, like, oh, shit, something's happening, and so you're just really anxious. One example where this is done terribly is Sinister. Now, Sinister is a phenomenal movie.
And it's going to be in my last cliche example.
Excellent. Sinister, it's a fantastic movie. It's one of the best horror movies of the 21st century. It really is. It introduces a great villain. It's so scary. It's so disturbing. Right up until the final frame of the movie.
Yeah, you should have just ended it, dude.
At the end of this movie, at the very,
Scott Derrickson?
Yeah, Scott Derrickson. The very end, the demon Bagul, whom they've thwarted, pops into frame for like 1 second and then it cuts to the credits.
It's almost like he's like, hi.
I kind of would love to see some cuts where they put sound effects into it, where he just goes like, bleh! Or like, ooh! You know? Or he's like Krusty the Clown. Hey, hey! It's just, after such a serious and disturbing and genuinely scary movie, it
wasn't necessary.
It didn't have scares like that in it. It didn't resort to cheap tactics. It was very good. One of the scariest scenes in the movie was when he's watching the Super 8 film.
And he sees it in the reflection of his
Yes.
laptop.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff in that.
And it looks at him.
Where it was like Ethan Hawke's horrified reaction that was really adding to it. So to have this at the end of the movie was really weird. It didn't make sense. And I remember bursting out laughing in the theater, which was weird.
I think you audibly said, oh, come on.
Yeah, I'm like, what the fuck? So that, I don't know why that happened.
I'd love to know.
The story was over. The movie was over. It didn't need to do anything. And Sinister 2, I think, didn't even come out theatrically. I think it was, I don't know.
No, we saw it in the theater.
No, we saw it at home. And maybe it came out theatrically, but it was a much smaller deal. Derrickson didn't even direct it. So if you're setting up a sequel with that, it was like...
Oh, the sequel.
Sinister 2.
Oh, you didn't
We
say
saw
that.
the first one in the theater.
Yeah, that's what... You never said Sinister 2.
That's what I
meant.
meant.
Go back to the tape.
Anyway, now I'm going to talk about maybe the greatest jump scare that's ever been filmed.
I hope I know which one it is.
You don't, because I don't think you've ever seen this movie.
Oh, because I have an example of a great jump scare.
I would love to hear it after mine. My example is the hallway scene in The Exorcist 3.
You've shown me this.
The Exorcist 3 was directed by and written by William Peter Blatty, who wrote the novel and the screenplay for the first movie. It stars, it's got Father Damien Karras back. It's got George C. Scott in place of Lee J. Cobb, who had passed at this point. And it picks up, the story of Father Damien Karras, who didn't die at the end of the first movie. And anyway, I'm not going to get into all that. But the scene in question, it's a long static shot. And that means it's a tripod shot. It doesn't move, the camera doesn't move, which is interesting. So everything is staged down this long hospital hallway, a couple of rooms on each side, and there's a nurse's station. And you just watch for a good solid 2 minutes of just activity. People walking around. The nurse gets up. It's all one shot. It's all one thing. And it's quite well choreographed, but there's not a ton going on. You're basically watching this young nurse go from room to room and whatnot and make her rounds. And then at the very, very end of this shot, the camera zooms in as the nurse is leaving a room, and you see just very briefly one of the old patients who was comatose, now up and around with giant shears in her hands, and the camera cuts away right as she's putting them around the nurse's neck. And as she's tensing her muscles to snap them shut, the camera cuts away. You don't need to see it happen, because honestly, the camera cutting away at that moment with the crescendo of sound is perfect. If they had shown her getting her head chopped off, sure, that would have been something, but I don't know. There's something about it cutting away at that moment, leaving you in the audience kind of finishing the scene in your head because of the inertia.
Yeah.
It's like a boat stopping. You can't quite stop once the engine is cut. So the camera cuts away, but your brain is still going. It's a magnificent
It's cutting
scene.
away and then cutting away.
Shears, actually, big ass Shears have a couple of really good scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
I love The Exorcist 3. I think it is so good. Brad Dourif is especially wonderful. He has some really good monologues in it, and he goes to town with them. And it's got a great ending, but this is how you do a jump scare. It was a very patient and crafted scene that took a lot of work and a lot of effort, and the payoff was 1 second of screen time. But I mean, I'm still talking about it 35 years later.
So my last example is technology fails.
Oh.
Everybody can think of a time where the flashlight doesn't turn on,
Or the car won't start.
or you can't get a cell signal.
Yeah.
Or you pick up the phone and the phone's dead. A lot where minor things add up to be major issues. So I'm not going to stay on this topic too much, but Scream does this really well with the constant phone. Cell phones not working. You can't get through to the person. Also, Ghostface uses the phone, and you never know if it's actually Ghostface calling or somebody pretending or prank calling. Especially in the later films, the phone becomes not only a device to use to trick somebody, but also a device that's untrustworthy. One of the other things is the GPS of it all. GPS will go awry, like in the movie Wrong Turn. You remember that movie from 2003?
I remember a movie that I saw, Right Turn. It was only 15 minutes long, and it was just this part about people taking a road trip, and then they get to their destination and nothing happens.
They rely on the GPS, and they end up being navigated into the woods but get lost because the device is malfunctioning and leading them to another place.
Yeah,
but
cannibal hillbilly, inbred family from hell.
And is it malfunctioning, or is it actually designed to, whenever somebody puts in an address, that it diverts there? Is big GPS in on it?
Who knows?
Or not? I mean, how would we ever know? The movie Truth or Dare, you all remember this movie, in 2008. They get it's a game app it's an app on your phone. But the app constantly malfunctions. So at really important moments, so it leads the characters to fatal consequences, or they have to do weird twisted challenges because the app itself is malfunctioning.
Yeah.
So that's
convenient.
Yeah, it's a quick and easy device to take people out of choice, and they're relying so much on their phone. I'm sure it's a commentary on technology, relying on technology and things like that.
I don't know why so many people aren't checking the batteries in their goddamn flashlights more often.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They put fresh batteries in, and then
maybe
paranormal.
The evil spirit sucks out devices.
Yeah, I mean, TV glitches.
But I mean, cell phones not working
flicker.
has definitely become, because cell phones are a tricky thing for a writer, you know? Like, how do you keep tension when you can just pick up the cube in your pocket and go, hey, police? You make it so like you're in the woods and you can't get a signal, or the evil entity kills phones.
I mean, Cabin in the Woods is filled with all kinds of cliches that they use it to their advantage.
Yeah, that's a movie about cliches.
Yeah, but some of the technology works because they're like linking up to things, but then when they go to use their cell phone for something really critical, and nothing works because they're in the middle of nowhere and there's no signal. A lot of different types of movies. There's always going to be some kind of technology fail, even if it's on like a film like Red Eye, another Wes Craven, where the computer system of the plane happens to malfunction when Cillian Murphy's up to do his evil doings. When you're in an elevator, like in the movie Devil, and none of the buttons are working, you're like stuck. Nobody's there to rescue you. The call box is sort of working, but not working. Sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. So, a lot of people rely on different levels of technology and then make them fail in order for them to move the plot forward. And I think that especially some of the like GPS, phone doesn't work, phone's dead, lights aren't working, the power's out. Those are cliches that are really overdone.
Yeah. I just have a couple quick ones to wrap up the episodes. Just little fun cliches that I don't really understand. The one I'm calling standing in place and watching someone die as they sacrifice themselves so you can get away, but you're not. You're just standing there watching them die. So you know what I'm talking about? Like In a Violent Nature has that, where the one character will launch themselves onto the villain and be like, run, go, and the other person just stands there for like an insanely long time, just waiting, watching like all of the advantage that they were just given through sacrifice disappear. Like they'll stand there until their person that they're screaming about is dead, and then the villain stands up to go look at them, and then they start running, and you're like, well, the 15 seconds that guy just bought you with his life, Jesus, it happens all the time. And I get that you're in shock, but I think
they need to maintain the shock.
Most people's...
You don't just snap out of shock like that?
But most people's instinctual reaction would be to fucking run.
Yeah.
In panic.
But what I'm saying is, if you're in shock and watching your friend who sacrificed himself for you, and then the villain turns, then you are still in shock.
Yeah.
And you won't be able to run.
It's weird that it happens so often that like, and it's infuriating. And you're like, oh, well, okay. So that guy died for no reason because the time that they gave you.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
You just stood there.
It's a frustrating reaction.
The other one is not finishing the job. So, you've been through the ringer and you shot the villain like in the shoulder or something, and they're not moving. And you've got more bullets in the gun. You're standing over them. Why don't you shoot them a few more times? Is it like, what is it about people in movies who, even after they've been brutalized by this person, they're like, well, you can't desecrate a dead body. Okay, you can, actually. This person's been trying to kill you, so crush their head until it's just juice.
Can we roll... Well, maybe some people don't have the stomach for that.
Sure.
But like, if you shot them,
shoot them
then
again.
shoot them again.
Shoot them until there are no more bullets.
Or check their pulse.
Now,
Nobody checks pulses on dead bodies. That's another thing we can roll into
no
this.
need to check the pulse, ladies and gentlemen.
And then they look all of a sudden out the window and the body's gone that
Yeah.
they just kicked out the window.
You don't have to check any pulses. You don't have to get that close. If there's a gun in your hand and bullets in the chamber, do the American thing and shoot it some more.
Kick the gun away from the hand, at least.
Sidney Prescott from Scream for learning this lesson eventually and just always emptying the chamber into Grossface's ghost face.
Yeah, I mean, Stu Macher wasn't dead.
Nope.
The other guy wasn't dead.
They're never dead. But so many movies where you watch the final survivor, whether it's the final girl or otherwise, go through a lot and witness a lot. And you'd think by this point that they've kind of grown up a bit and lost their innocence. But when it comes to putting another round into the villain, it's like, well, they're not coming at me right now.
But then that's why it frustrates you, I guess, to have an unkillable villain. Because no matter how many times you shoot Mike Myers and he's dead and he's burned, and you burn him in a basement and seal him and everything, he comes back.
Well, my problem with that is for the first two movies, you talked about how the fact he's just a regular man who is evil and in an asylum, but that doesn't explain why he's surviving. So by the fifth movie, you have to introduce supernatural elements, but those were dumb. So
but what's the point then if he can never die?
Yeah, the point is that
now we just have
you're a movie producer who, if one writer is arguing with you that it's stupid, you fire his dumb ass and hire somebody else who will do it.
Now we just have to watch 2 hours of rooting for someone who may end up like getting the better of this villain, but never really does.
And the number one cliche that needs to go, that was never good, that never will be good, that will always be crap, is moralizing. Don't use your movie as a way to deal with your weird Catholic school obsessions. So, movies where characters, you know they're going to die because they're horny, or they smoked weed, or they didn't go to church that Sunday. It's just, you really see this in the Friday the 13th series, especially by the Reagan years when good old America stopped having fun. And, because like in the first Friday the 13th, they're all smoking weed and fucking and making fun of cops.
It was really the 80s.
But by the mid 80s, by like the Reagan years and the real like whatever, Jason was straight up murdering, he was only murdering drifters and gay people and minorities. And you're like, okay, what is this?
Yeah.
So using your horror movie as a way to, I don't know, scare us into Jesus, I don't like that.
Well, I think that's what the new TV show Hysteria sort of plays up is, satanic panic. Well, what if we really do become a band who conjures Satan and does terrorize the town?
It's definitely become now a trope that's being subverted, because I think we all agree that it's ludicrous, that it's stupid, that when if you're going to punish people for being humans, you get a room full of college kids together and then I'm supposed to go, oh, they deserve to die because they were horny and smoking weed. Well, all right. What did you think was going to happen?
I do think at least gone are the days of if teenagers go off to have sex, they're not always the first ones to die now.
Another one is, the black guy dying first. I think that's gone away a little bit.
And they made a movie for it. There's
a lot. Focusing on that, and it's become a real reckoning. But one instance where that is perfect and was purposeful was Dwayne Jones dying at the end of Night of the Living Dead. He actually, the actor, said no, he's got to die. No one would let a black man survive and be the hero. He's the one who suggested it, and George Romero was like, okay. So they had good old boys.
Was that the one in the mall?
No, that's Dawn of the Dead. Night of the Living Dead is the one in the house where the roving bands of rednecks just pop him at the end, even though he's not a zombie.
It's not when they go to that island at the end, right?
That is the remake of Dawn of the Dead. None of those.
Of the Dead's messed up, but Day of the Dead is the one. Dawn of the Dead?
Day of the Dead is in an underground army bunker.
Which the one in the mall?
Dawn of the Dead.
I like that one the best, I think.
And that was Journey of the Dead, where we try to figure out which Dead movie my wife is talking about.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Bye.
This has been Clichés. You thought we were done.
We aren't.
False start. Yeah, stop.
False ending.
False ending.
Fake ending.
Anyway.
Just kidding. We're not really back.
You got Shyamalan.
Thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time. Happy Octerrorfest. Terror in Tandem is written, produced, and recorded by Laura and Richard Mathiasen, and edited and mixed by Richard Mathiasen. Our theme was written and performed by Carrie Denver, and all other music was written and performed by David Hispanic. All opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and should be taken as such. Thanks for listening, and please remember to give us a like, a review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. We're still